Thank you. Sanitize as often as you can. We have Omicron around the corner. Welcome back. We've had a few changes on the program. We have decided that the session that was for 12 to 1 goes at this time, and the one that was from 11 to 12 will come afterwards. This session now, the 12 to 1, the presenters are already here. I'll briefly introduce them. We have Dr. Kahiana, Dr. Danson Kahiana as the moderator. He will be in conversation with Dr. Spire Sentongo. I felt we can't start this session without me saying this. In the introductory article to called Satire as a Tool for Critique in Uganda, Edgar Nabtanyi succinctly describes Jimmy Spire Sentongo by saying, in Spire's work, What I Saw When I Died, Sentongo, like Onyango, Obo, Buembo, Ejet, has joined a select group of Ugandan public intellectuals. We are honored, ladies and gentlemen, to be in the presence of Jimmy Spire Sentongo, doctor. He is a quintessential of living the humanities. He is a scholar and he's an intellectual. We are so proud of you. We are so proud that you're part of Makerere University and you're part of CHUSS, that is the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Our online audiences have not forgotten you. You're so very welcome. We hope you've logged in and you can hear us well. Keep your messages coming in. We'll be reading them. So let the conversation begin. Dr. Danson Kahiana is also our very own. He's a prolific scholar. I'm just looking at him and thinking about the best words to use to describe him. All I can say in summary, he's a prolific scholar. I keep telling him that when I grow up, I just want to be like him. Almost every quarter, a year, he's having a publication coming out, including today morning, he sent on the literature WhatsApp group his upcoming publication. Ladies and gentlemen, let the conversation begin. A round of applause to Jimmy and Danson.
Thank you very much, Cindy. That's what you get when you teach well. So when your former student starts praising you in public, thank you so much for being a wonderful student, Dr. Evelyn Cindy Magara. I'll begin by recognizing my mentor and friend, Professor Susan Chiguli. Thank you for being wonderful, and thank you for being with us here. In the morning, Professor Kabonesa took all the praise. So I would like you to share in that praise. You mentored us very well. Thank you so much. Well, we shall begin by asking Dr. Siminyo to come and tell us about Makerere University Press that has given us this beautiful book. Thank you.
Thank you, Danson, and thank you, Spire, for giving us this opportunity. These are colleagues whom I deal with on first name basis, so you forgive my apparent familiarity. We have labored together to give birth to Makerere University Press in the shape it is, and I am ever so grateful. And out of that labor, you can see relationships that grow. I want to take this opportunity to particularly thank my kid sister, who is the principal of the college. My follower is called Josephine, and so every Josephine is my kid sister. Thank you for making CHUSS what it is and putting it on the move, because when we look at this list of the publications from Makerere University Press, by far the majority are from CHUSS, and we are so proud of that. The director of the Directorate of Research and Graduate Training, Professor Buyinza, is here. He has been our supervisor and host since we began the revival process, and I want to say thank you for the far you have pushed us. It's not been easy, but it's working. Members, I am not a stranger to CHUSS because this was my home as a student. I studied education, literature, English, and I was in the literature and language department then of CHUSS. I came back for a master's and was in the literature department. So what I am doing is really a product of what CHUSS made me, particularly the Department of Literature, and I'm ever so grateful. I remember one of the people that taught me, and he's still there, is a Basi Chiimba professor. The other one is Professor Dipio, who was then a teaching assistant when I was myself an undergraduate student. So my umbilical cord lies with you, and I am grateful for the formation that you took. Now, Makerere University Press exists to put out to the public what the thinkers, the researchers, the scholars in Makerere do. I know we have done a lot of publishing over the years, ever since we were established nearly 100 years ago, but the effort to have our own outlet has been on and off over the years. Actually, I was looking at some of the literature going back as far back as 1940, and they are talking of Makerere having a university press of its own, a publishing outlet. But over the years, we have started and died off and restarted and died off. I am sure this time we have the determination and the goodwill to establish something that will stay. We have a go-ahead to come up with a comprehensive policy, which we hope will be approved. We have a provision in the budget for Makerere University Press. There is even talk of establishing a separate entity entirely committed to this, rather than under the DRGT, and with the blessing of the director, I'm sure this is going to go far. So why am I here? To tell you thank you as CHUSS. So far we have 8 publications. Wilfred Lajul was from philosophy. Wasuna Hamalwa was one of us from CHUSS. Sauda Namyalo is right here. Oswald Ndorerire was one of us. He edited a piece of work in Runyachitara that has become a standard for all the local languages. We had Jimmy Spire is here. There is Dominic Dipio is one of us. You can see it's like beside the one from education. So far, the 8 publications we have are all CHUSS related. I have a reason to say thank you to you and to encourage you, please, we have a display there, pick a copy and see. Somebody walked in from Russia the other day to do procurement. He says they go all over the country, all over the continent, buying books that then they distribute in their university libraries. And he made a comment that tickled me. He said, everywhere on the continent, standards of publishing seem to be dropping, but yours are rising. Yours are rising. I said, fine. This one doesn't pay me a salary, but I think he has paid me more than anybody else would. We are putting in our best. The peer reviewers are from among us. The editors are from among us. And what we want is a world-class standard. A world-class standard that everybody will know that and say, this is Makerere. And you and I will make that possible. I welcome you. If you have done all this research, there are things that nobody else is interested in publishing. Why don't you bring them to us? They will become the basis for our teaching, for teaching in sister universities. Can you imagine all the universities we have on the in the country, and they're all looking to Makerere. Can we put our pen to paper, transform this into published books, and market them to help strengthen our delivery? Jimmy Spire has excited us a lot with his What I Saw When I Died, because it stands between academic and general reading. It's very good for the literature students. They use it to study satire, and that's why there's a whole chapter on that a colleague wrote. But then the general reader also, so some people call me as late as midnight, 6 a.m. to say, where can I find a copy of this book? We are currently marketing it in hard copy, but we are making all our publications soon available through ABC on the net, so that those who call from Kenya, like some have done, those from Russia will say, how do we continue to get copies of this? They will find it online. We are working towards that. Please give us the support. Thank you, Spire. Thank you, colleagues who have published with us. Others are welcome to join in the struggle. May the good Lord bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Semenyo. Dr. Magara, how many minutes do we have? Because that's very important. 25. Oh, 20 minutes. All right, so allow me to call you Spire. You're my brother. So don't really make me call you Dr. Sentongo. It's too long, first of all. So allow me to call you Jimmy Spire. You've heard we have 25 minutes. That means that your questions have to be very crispy. We shall begin by celebrating you. So in 15 months, you have What I Saw When I Died. We have Quarantined or Quarantined, very Ugandan pronunciation. My Ordeal in Uganda's COVID-19 isolation centers. And then we have the book From Kitara Nation, Uncomfortable Laughter. 3 books in 15 months. To what factors do you attribute this prolific production?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. I hope you also allow me to call you Dan. Yes, and good are we still in the morning or afternoon? Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'm happy to be given this opportunity to speak about my work. It's not really an opportunity that many writers get. There is a prominent philosopher called David Hume. When he was 26, he wrote a book titled A Treatise of Human Nature. And he had thought it was going to make a significant contribution to philosophy. But it had a terrible reception, almost never getting known. So in his own evaluation of the book, he says, the book landed stillborn from the press, and it did not even excite a murmur among the zealots. So I'm really happy that at least my book has excited a murmur, not among the zealots, but among scholars. Actually, not a murmur, a conversation. Yeah, that said, how do I get to write these books in this time? First of all, it takes a lot of time to write a book, depending on the nature of the book, because there are different genres. Some will take much longer. But also we have to consider that for some of the publications we see here, it's a coincidence that they happen to come out at the same time. This one took me the shortest time to write, Quarantine, because it's more of a memoir about my experience. It took me 4 months to write this because I was just telling a story of what I went through. What I Saw When I Died is a collection of pieces that I've written over time, and it was being worked on for some time. Dr. Semenyo will tell you that it took about 3 years to produce this book. So they only happened to come out around the same time, but this had been there for some time. I think many of us are familiar with the process of scholarly writing. It has to go through reviews and all that. So if someone tells you that they're writing a book in 2 months and it's out, then there is a problem somewhere. And this being a collection of my cartoons, these are cartoons spanning from 2016. So it's also work for some period of time. Okay. Yeah, well, I would take the credit that I try to write as much as I can, but I also have to be sincere about this, that it has taken time.
All right. we have a humble writer amongst us. You said that book took 3 years. What I saw when I died. Did the lapse in time affect the cogency of some of your arguments? If that had come out 3 years ago, would it have had the same power as it has now?
Well, maybe yes, maybe not. But I wouldn't generally look at that as it could be a problem for some kinds of books that by the time it comes out, it's already overtaken by events. Many of the things I write about in this book are social, political, that even if, let's say, the age limit discussion, it has passed, but it's something that we have to remember even after so many years. As a country, we have to continue reflecting about these things. It has happened, it might happen, and we might want to know what took place around the time we're having the debates, the kind of sentiments that were there in the public. I write about things like the culture of fundraising, which has, there has been a snapshot which has been really moving around. I write about so many things about our society that I think would prompt one to reflect at whatever point, whatever moment they read the book. Certainly they would need to know the time when it was written in order to contextualize it, but still it remains relevant throughout time. There are books like Animal Farm. When was Animal Farm published? 1950s, early 1950s. The author was writing about the
communist regime.
There's the Cold War between communism and capitalism. But up to now, we still read it, even giving it different contexts. So I imagine that though some of the things I write about have already passed, the cancer machine and all that, it will still inform our reflection.
All right, thank you very much. How did you get into satirical writing? Who are your mentors? I have mentioned my mentor, Professor Susan Cheguli. Who are your mentors? How did you get into satirical writing?
Well, I don't really have a background in literature in a strict sense. Actually, I did not like literature classes, partly because I did not want to be told what to do. I wanted to write in whichever way I wanted. And we started from that point of being guided when you're doing this, these are the rules and that. We hadn't reached that point of creative writing where I think there is some relative freedom. And I felt a bit constrained and uneasy about it. So I quit literature class in senior 2. So when you to talk about my mentors, maybe it should be more in terms of inspiration. Where do I get the inspiration from? It's mostly from writers that I've read. I'm also incidentally not so much into novel reading. Maybe that's a weakness on my part. But the first novel I read from cover to cover was the one I just mentioned, Animal Farm. And I was really struck by the way this author was able to hold you from the first page up to the end that you don't want to stop. And how he addresses serious issues through seemingly what you might consider to be jokes. The first time I read it in senior 2, I didn't even understand the context. Not until senior 6 that I get to know, oh, this is what he was talking about. But even without knowing that, I really loved the book. So that's when I start loving satire. And then later when I get into drawing cartoons, I get to love it even more. And learning a bit about our society, that we are a people that really love our laugh. We want to laugh about everything, even sorrowful things. Even during burial, you'll get people laughing after something. Now, what this communicated to me is that if I want to communicate as a writer or as a scholar, the best strategy would be to go through channels that I know people are so easily attracted to. I've been into scholarly writing for some time, but if you ask me how many people are reading my journal articles, I don't know. I can imagine there are very few. How many people are reading?
Maybe 8.
Yeah, how many people have read my book chapters? Very few. I've edited 2 scholarly books How many have read them? Still maybe very few. Not because the quality of the work there might be poor, but perhaps they do not speak to the sensibilities of our people.
Yeah.
So if I want to speak to the wider audience, to the wider public, to communicate beyond the scholarly circles, I have that problem. I've written about it in my scholarly work. I have that problem with our scholarly practices, that at times we seem to be speaking to ourselves and we listen back to the echoes in our chambers and we think we are communicating, but we are not really talking to anyone. Some of the publications we count up to 20 journal articles we are publishing for the dump. Maybe we are the only ones that have read. Even your office mate doesn't know what you're writing. But when I draw a cartoon and I see it on WhatsApp, I see it wherever, it means I'm communicating. When I write in newspapers, which incidentally it seems in academic circles, these are fora we somehow despise. If I'm to present that for promotion, I'll be told to band all that as community outreach or whatever.
Yeah.
So I've written in newspapers over 200 articles, but all that may not really count.
Well, it counts. It will give you like 2 points
Yes.
for community outreach.
Like 2 points. But if you compare that to the journal articles I've written, and this is not to despise journal or scholarly publications, I think in terms of impact, we talk of impact with high impact factor journals, but I think my newspaper articles make higher impact than my journal articles. So I get more fulfillment writing like that and knowing that while I'm making jokes about what happens, I'm able to communicate and people are really listening. There is some evidence that what I write gets across to the public.
Thank you. I think the public relations officer is listening, the one of CHUSS. I hope she will ask for a newspaper article from the principal very soon, because also that can be a way of engaging the wider public than academic journals. All right, let's talk about the title of your work, What I Saw When I Died. Why do you privilege the mortuary or the grave in your writing?
I wouldn't put it that way, that I privilege the mortuary or the grave. But even before I get into explaining that title, so many people have been asking, did you really die? Are we talking to a ghost? Do you exist? Did you resurrect?
Should we run away?
Yeah, incidentally, this was not the original title of this book, what I suggested for the manuscript. The original title was Laughing in Discomfort. The reviewers of the book were, I got to know, Dr. Edgar Nabutanyi and Dr. Danson Kayana.
Who told you? It was supposed to be confidential. Dr. Siminyu, should we trust you again?
Somehow when you get to know people, you even know their writing styles. Even if the reviews are anonymized, you're able to tell this is Danson. So it's not about Dr. Siminyu.
Okay.
Now, from the reviews, one of the reviewers, and I suspect it was you, suggested that there is an article in here titled What I Saw When I Died, and it plays around the dead, the politicians that are passed on, former presidents, a conversation between themselves and what's happening wherever they are. Of course, it's imaginative.
Yeah.
So the reviewer suggested, why don't you make this the title of the book? Oh, and when I saw this, I said, yeah, this is it. Of course, it coincided with my own fantasies about death, and death is one of the things that I find so mystical. I often ask myself, yes, I'm here talking, moving, but at one point I'll be no more. All the people that are gathered here, at some point we refer to them as the late so-and-so. So from that total presence to full absence, it's really something that should intrigue anyone that thinks about it. But also I looked at our society in terms of the things that happen, especially at the political level. There are some things that you see and you ask yourself, are we really alive? Is this real? Has this real happened? Has someone done this and life is going on? So sometimes you feel like you're dead or you're in some other world, and perhaps at some point you will wake up and start living. I find that title to be really meaningful to what I write about, the awkward, the strange things, the ridiculous that we observe almost on a daily basis, not only political, even socially. But you must have observed that in many other articles I talk about death, I talk about the cemetery. The cemetery is a place where you find the dead, or at least their bodies or their remains. It's a place that we go to mourn, but it's also a place that at times we go to laugh. It happens that after years, you buried your father. My father passed on, my parents, some time back, but it's amazing how sometimes I go sit on his grave and start conversing with someone while laughing. Just a while ago, I was at the same point crying. Even with the things that happen around us, we find a way of laughing about them. I write in this book that if we did not find a way of laughing about things that happen in Uganda, maybe they would have killed us already.
Yeah.
But that laughter is kind of therapeutic. It helps us live on with the pain or with the discomfort.
All right. Thank you so much. I think I'll allow the audience to ask you a few questions. And if we have more time, I will ask more questions because we're supposed to have 1 hour, but it was cut to 25 minutes. So instead of going on and on with my questions, may we have some questions from the audience, please? And if they're not there, I will continue with my questions. Professor Chiguli.
Thank you very much. Thank you, DK. Thank you for recognizing me. Thank you, Spire, for this. I'm excited about the book. I've been reading, you're the only reason I buy The Observer, but please don't tell them. Right. I just wanted to ask something very simple and short. When you were asked about influences in general, you said that George Orwell's Animal Farm was something that inspired you. When I read what you write, I read Jonathan Swift, I read Austin Ejett, and I wondered if those are just accidental, or how does the fact that I read, I mean, I'm just mentioning those two because your style is so very close to them. It doesn't mean that you have copied them, but it just means that you have very close, in terms of when I read, very close associations to how they see and to how they express themselves. And I wondered if you think this is just coincidental because you may be handling the same subjects, even though Jonathan Swift is what in literary circles they call a dead white male. And well, even a jet now, my professor is a dead black male. But I don't know if there are any associations, any way you are aware of these other writers as you write. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chiguli. We have Dr. Peace Musimenta. Dr. Peace first, please. Then we have the chief host, the principal.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether I'm worthy to ask a question to this distinguished scholar, but I want to, first of all, to say I appreciate what Spire writes. I've read one of his books. And the question that comes to my mind is, how do you get this discipline of writing and concentrating because I see most of us are scattered and we don't get this discipline like you do. And maybe also to ask, is there a way you are thinking of nurturing the young people to admire you, your style of writing, so that we have a generation that will take over, or succession plan in the event that you go? Are we going to have some young spires in the making? What plans do you have to have that kind of succession plan in this way? Thank you.
Thank you, Peace. One way is to invite him to your class so that he can inspire your class. All right, our chief host, the principal.
The hosts are the organizing committee, Dr. Zaid Setito, Cindy, Dr. Cindy Magara. Those are the hosts. So I'm also a guest. Thank you very much. My doctor asked me, do you know Spire? I said, yes, I do. And he's in CHUSS. So I was feeling I became a celebrity at that moment in that hospital. And then he said, does he have children? I said, yes. You know, we need to preserve those genes. Because those genes are not common here in Uganda. But I wanted to ask about the fact that, is it possible, having laughed, that we could actually die in laughter? Why am I saying this? The role of public intellectuals is to awaken, which you are actually doing. But I'm wondering, after this laughter, how does it cascade into what one would want to see? For example, saying the change we want to see. Is it possible that we could easily die in laughter? I remember when people drowned in that boat, and all that came out was balancing the boat, and we would laugh, you know, but people died. And it was good that we could get over it and laugh. Is it possible that a nation can actually then die in laughter? Thank you.
Thank you, Principal. We have the last question behind. Professor Tabajuka is here. All right, Professor Tabajuka, you can't say no to him. I mean, we are here because of him. There was somebody behind. Did he or she give up?
Thank you.
Maybe you should stand up, Professor. It might be wanting you to stand up.
Yes. Thank you. I should also confess that I am a big follower of. I'm a follower of Dr. Spire Sentongo's writings, including in the Observer. For example, I know that the last Observer hasn't published the cartoon. I don't know what happened. So you can see how close this is. But much more intriguing is the way you use humor and the way you use, would I say, comedy to tackle extremely serious issues. But in one of the instances, you seem to look at laughter as actually not being laughter. To say that when you see people laughing so much, you should get afraid that maybe they are not just laughing, something much more serious is happening. I don't know whether you would like to push that a little bit further and communicate a little more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The final person. I'm so sorry. I won't allow other people. The gentleman in I'm colorblind. Is that purple? or read. I don't know.
Thank you so much. My name is Noor Muhyiddin from School of Women and Gender Studies. And I want to thank Dr. Spire, and the name really befits you. So if you were produced, and I know you were still young sometime, and they called you Spire, I think the name was meant to mean inspiration. Thank you for inspiring many writers. My question is very simple, and I'm very eager to hear what exactly you saw when you died. Thank you.
All right, Spire, you'll please answer those questions, maybe in 5 minutes. Otherwise, Dr. Magara will kill me. And also, please don't forget what Professor Tabajuka talked about. Why is The Last Observer not having your cartoon? What are some of the perils of your work? Have you received calls telling you to be careful or to hire a mafia? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all the interesting questions and compliments. Maybe let me start with the one of Professor Simon, not because the others are not important, and what Dan has added. Yeah, that question is very common. Have I ever been threatened by anyone because of what I write, the cartoons I draw? And I think the question is suggestive of a lot. I really find it strange when an NRM person asks me that question. Have you been threatened? So they expect me to be threatened. And what does that say? I have not been threatened by anyone. And sometimes I respond, it's because we live in a democracy. Yeah. We live in a democracy, so my right to say what I say has been respected. And I'm grateful. I haven't really been threatened. So I'll come back to the last part of your question later. Oh, why didn't my article appear in my cartoon in the Observer this week? That could have been one of the moments when I was dead. Well, sometimes you don't have the time to write each and every other week. So I didn't have the time because my head of department was on my neck for research. Yeah, now going back to the order in which the questions were asked, Professor Chiguli, I must confess that I have been inspired by many people, although I only mention George Orwell. But some of the others that have inspired me, I'm not even quite sure. I can't remember that it's at this point when I read this that this person inspired me. At times I hear about their work in conversation, but I haven't read their original work. There is a philosopher called John Locke. His work appeared to have a lot in common with that of another philosopher called Thomas Hobbes. And he had always been asked, but did you read Thomas Hobbes' work? And he said he had never read it. Actually, he writes it even in one of his books that he never read Thomas Hobbes' book, The Leviathan. But then one of his friends confessed later, actually it's about 2 months ago, an article came out from a letter of a friend saying that actually John Locke always moved with a copy of the Leviathan. He had it, a copy of Thomas Hobbes' book, that it was insincere of him to say he never read it, yet he always carried it. Now, in my case, I hadn't read Jonathan Swift, for instance, one of the people you mentioned. In fact, I got to know about him from Dr. Nabutanyi. One time invited me to his class, his literature class. I think he's the one who mentioned the name in the introduction. And that's when I became curious about him, and I went and read only one work, The Modest Proposal, something like that, A Modest Proposal. I found it quite in line with what I write. More of a coincidence, but also when you read many of the satirical works, there are certain things they have in common because the devices might be the same, the devices that they deploy. Not being a literature person, at times I don't even know those devices and that I'm using them I learn about them from my friends, the dancers, the Navutani, when they say that now you're using lampooning, and I ask, what is lampooning? They say, no, it's here in your work. Say, all I do is write, but I don't know that in a technical sense, this is exactly what I'm doing. Recently, someone took a screenshot of a book, a section from a book of Ngugi, I can't recall which section, where he seems to be making suggestions about taxation. I had also suggested in one of the articles here more things that, yeah, devil on the cross. I had suggested more things that government should tax. And this person was asking, isn't this from Ngugi? But I've never read that book of Ngugi. I've only read one. So at times it's coincidence. Maybe in cases where you find that the wording and everything is similar, then one cannot claim that it's coincidence. So I'm not a John Locke who will deny that they've been inspired by someone they read. But I must admit, there are so many people who inspire me, although I may not recall at every point that I got this from so and so. Excuse me, yeah. Mentoring, am I mentoring some people? My succession plan? No, from what I see, the people still want me around. So I shouldn't be mentoring anyone to succeed me. Yeah, the party will decide when that time comes. Anyway, there are some young people who approach me. Well, I have to confess that writing doesn't necessarily mean that you can as well be a good mentor. Sometimes maybe one can only be inspired by your work, but in terms of mentorship, that's a different skill. There are some people who have come to me for mentorship in writing, but honestly, in some instances, I have nothing to offer to them. I don't know how I can teach them, this is how you start, this is how you go about this. It maybe could take another person who doesn't write the way I do to be able to mentor another person to do it. You might find actually that for many of the writers we have, those who taught them did not really write anything. Yeah, so I'm not really gifted in that field of mentorship in writing particularly. I've mentored some in cartoon drawing. At least for that I can try, but writing I find it a bit difficult. And second, I don't really want to replicate myself. I don't want to have so many spires doing the same kind of thing. I want that everyone looks from within their talents, their abilities, and they do what they can do best. I've sometimes seen people who are trying to copy others and they end up in their shadows, or they end up imitating, and once they're exhausted at the game of imitation, that's how far they can go. So I don't want to invite people into imitating me, but maybe to invite them into inspiring them to do other things that they can do, perhaps even much better than I try. 1 minute? What do I say in 1 minute? Yes, the principal's question. The possibility of dying in laughter. That's a very good observation. Sometimes we see people laughing in instances where we don't expect them to be laughing. And that suggests a problem. It's the last article I wrote in The Observer. And I asked Mr. President, does it worry you that Ugandans are still happy and laughing? When you look at the humor that circulates on our social media, it partly indicates that there is a problem. With all that happens, to see that people are still very happy and cracking jokes. Sheep, the example you have given of that sheep, what happened, the fatal accident, and people still make fun of it, everything. We are just looking for memes and slogans and all that, process by process. It shows that maybe we have reached a point where we feel we are totally helpless. All we can do is to laugh. What else do you do? sometimes you see at a funeral, I've also written about this, at a funeral, someone reaches a point where they stop crying, they just laugh. Does that indicate they are happy? They are overwhelmed by sorrow and they can no longer cry. You can only cry up to a certain point. But if the question is about change, can this prompt change? Laughter looked at differently. There is a psychologist, I think he's called Scott. He says it's one of the weapons of the weak. When you have nothing else to deploy in particular circumstances, you might just pull out laughter. Let's just laugh at these people. Maybe at some point they'll feel ashamed of what they are doing. So by ridiculing the powerful, we are using that also as a weapon, since we are weak and we have nothing else. So when I draw a cartoon, let's say of the president, I feel empowered. Even those who laugh about that cartoon feel empowered that they can laugh about someone who is so powerful. After all, there is no other way we can reach him.
Okay.
Lastly, no, second last, use of laughter, should it worry us? I think Professor Rutabajuka have partly answered that. Yes, it should really worry us that people are laughing. Although it's a therapy, but it's also an indication of a problem. What did I see when I died? You'll find it in the book. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jimmy. And thank you for those wonderful questions. In a very special way, I would like to thank Professor Winza for staying up to now. Most people who come to open conferences, after opening, they go away. But he has stayed up to now. Thank you so much. I would like to thank the principal, the deputy principal, and my dean, Dr. Namialo, for staying. Many deans don't stay. You know, when they become deans, the learning remains to the lecturers and senior lecturers, you know. But she has stayed, and I know she'll stay up to the end. Thank you so much. And Jimmy, please write more and more. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Before you go, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. What we have here, I will repeat what I said at the start, a quintessential of living the humanities. A round of applause to Dr. Kahiana and Dr. Sentongo. We've not really done well with time, and maybe I could use the podium that I have now to talk to our principal that we really do need more of these conversations. We could have Sentongo for half a day or a full day, and we can't get satisfied of him. So I think CHUSS and Makerere Printing Press should be thinking about at least every 3 months to have such a conversation where we put up our research and share it with the entire world. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting time, I think we will have a late lunch, which is in order, because the conversations are interesting. I would like to invite the next set of scholars, Ivan Lukanda, Dr. Ivan Lukanda, the chair here, and we'll give you 25 minutes. A round of applause to Ivan Lukanda, comes here. Dr. Deo Kawalia, he will be talking about towards a corpus-based approach for describing Ugandan languages. Welcome, Dr. Kawalia. Dr. Ivnabulia Malagala. She'll be interrogating indigenous environmental wisdom in Luganda and Lusoga oral narratives. Dr. Gerard Walulia, he'll be talking about Idi Amin's identity through the camera lens, revisiting the 1970s and published photographs. Ladies and gentlemen, we give the floor to Dr. Ivan Lukanda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you, organizers, for giving me the opportunity to chair this session. We've already been inspired by Dr. Sentongo, and now in this conversation, we shall be talking about corpus, environmental literature, and why Idi Amin keeps coming back our faces long after he's dead. So I want to first introduce our speakers. Please note the rhymes in their names. Our first speaker will be Mr. Deo Kawalia, not last letters in the surname. Next will be Dr. Eve Navulia. And the last one will be Dr. Gerard Walulia. It can only be a very high level of organization that can bring all these names together. I want to converse first with Dr. Deo Kawalia. And basically what they'll be telling us in their presentations is how the funding has furthered their research, the challenges they have faced in the process of doing research, and how their research has contributed to building the humanities and the humanistic sciences. Dr. Deo Kawalia, please come and talk to us about your topic towards a corpus-based approach for describing Ugandan languages.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much, colleagues, for listening to me. I'm talking about my just concluded a project towards a corpus-based approach for describing Ugandan languages. And I'll just be brief because I'll be giving an overview of how the project went. My mentor was around. She was Professor Susan Chiguli. I think she stepped out. Okay. Okay, so I'll be giving the objectives, a brief about the objectives of this project. I'll also talk about corpus linguistics, what we mean by corpus linguistics. I'll give the outputs and outcomes of this project and the challenges that were faced during this the research period. And finally, I'll give the contribution to humanities research. Now, if the major objective, the overall objective of this project was to promote corpus linguistic studies in Ugandan languages, basically by initiating the process of building really accessible corpora. Corpora is the plural for corpus, and I'll be explaining what we mean by a corpus. Specifically, in this project, I intended to build a corpus of Runyankole Ruchiga and organize this corpus and archive it in a format that would make it accessible to linguistic researchers. And finally, to prove the viability of this corpus by providing or writing 2 journal articles using the same corpus data. Now, what we mean by corpus linguistics is that it concerns the analysis and description of languages, description of language or language use as realized in texts. And when we talk about texts, is actually what we mean by corpus. It's a collection of texts that linguists normally use to describe or to analyze languages. So corpus linguistics enables real language description using large quantities of texts that are collected and brought together in what we call an electronic corpus. It's an alternative to what we normally do in language research when we go out there in the field and list language data directly from the speakers. But this doesn't mean that you can use it, or you can always only use it without a listing data. I mean, both methodologies can complement each other. You can use corpus method together with a listation method from the field. So from this project, the outputs and outcomes, I built an electronic text corpus of Nyankore Ruchiga, which was named the Makerere Nkore Chiga corpus, and the size of this corpus is about 800,000 words, or what we call tokens, technically, and 84,000 types, those are distinct words. And this corpus is archived under the Makerere University Institutional Repository under this handle. So if you want it, you can actually just go straight to the repository and access it and use it for analysis. Now, what can we do with this kind of corpus, with the corpus that we built? One, we can use it for frequency counts. And when we say frequency counts, it's, we can use it to determine the frequency of words, the frequencies of occurrence of words within a language. Okay? This is used in different, for example, you can tell which word is more frequent or is the most frequent in a given language by just analyzing the corpus. This can be used actually in writing dictionaries. We've seen in dictionaries, those who are conversant with dictionaries, when words are given their frequencies, that, for example, this word happens, in the first 3,000 words, for example, a person says, this word will be there. And I mean, you can't easily do that without using a corpus. Secondly, we can use corpora, or this corpus that we compiled, to compile dictionaries. How? For example, the first thing that a dictionary compiler does is to get words that will be described or defined in a dictionary. And these days, you don't just go around asking people which words you're using, but we can just use this corrected corpus to determine the words. We can use the same corpus for making spell checkers. We can use the same corpus for extraction of field-specific term lists. Okay? For example, Dr. Namiaro is an expert in term building, and I think she will be talking about that tomorrow. But among other methods that are used to build terms in a given fields, you can use also the corpus to extract the already used words that are being used. And we can also use this corpus for different kinds of linguistic analysis. So other outputs include journal articles, 2 journal articles that I have written. The representation in Nyankore Ruchiga written text, an analysis of tense and aspect marking in the Makerere Nkore Chiga corpus, and the other one about the Ruchiga model auxiliary bus. Now, the details of these, of course, have been presented at different symposia organized by CHUSS, so I will not go into those. Now, the challenges, one of the things, we had to get an MA student, but I didn't get it, basically because, as Professor Windsor said in the morning, we get very few students to do these, to study, for example, languages, and it's very difficult to get one that will actually work on Nyankore Ruchiga. So I was not able to get that. So I don't also manage to get text from the Ruchiga-speaking community, because that district where Ruchiga is spoken was under lockdown. At the time, because it's a border district, at the time that I collected data. The corpus is not annotated, so which makes it difficult to use by non-native speakers. There's no proper archiving or hosting software, so this makes it also difficult for public to access. And finally, we don't have a free analysis software that can be used by everyone to analyze this corpus. So finally, the contribution to humanities of this project to humanities research, the corpus that has already been built is a source of ready data for different kinds of linguistic research. So anyone who wants to do research on Nyankore Ruchiga can use this corpus for any study, language-related study. Secondly, of course, as I said, I present at different conferences and seminars about corpus linguistic research. The journal articles that have been written, it also has inspired collaborations, for example, authorship, because I don't speak actually Nyankore Ruchiga, so in order to publish, I have to collaborate with people who speak this language. And we have also written joint projects, for example, that of compiling a corpus for another another language, the Seoul language in northeastern Uganda. Next, there are also other projects, people who have written project proposals, and they have suggested to use this corpus for their projects. Okay, and another thing is that we have also written a joint project to write corpora for 5 other Ugandan languages, and it's been an inspiration partly from this project. And lastly, this project has contributed to the development of the young field of Bantu corpus linguistics, which is in its infancy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deo Kawalia. In this session, language is not only money, but it's everything. I want to invite our next speaker, who is Dr. Eve Nabulia, to talk to us about environmental literature. She will describe what she's talking about specifically. If you have 8 minutes, then the audience will engage you on whatever will not be clear.
Good afternoon, everyone. I can afford to take off my mask. Yeah, thank you very much for staying, to listen to us. Yes, in this project was funded by Andrew Mellon under the ARI Career Program. And my mentor was Professor Aaron Mushenjezi, now the DVC of Uganda Christian University Mukono. But he remained working with me even when he had moved to his other place of work. So I'm very grateful to him. Yes, in this project, actually, I set out to provide evidence concerning the potential relevancy of indigenous ecological and related knowledge in folktales of the Baganda and Basoga. And I conducted oral performances of these folktales, and I was very impressed that these folktales actually are alive. You know, when we live in this cosmopolitan environment in the city, you imagine that no one tells stories to anyone else. I mean, perhaps some of us don't, but the stories are alive in the villages. And I anchored I partnered with a program under CBS that is promoted by the Kingdom of Uganda Kingdom that has storytelling communities, just as a way of keeping the stories alive. So that helped a lot. And the data that I collected was through those performances that I attended and also interviewed some key informants. And I discovered that actually the stories have a lot of information about biodiversity preservation methods. And many of the stories actually about forests and how people would collect firewood without actually ever depleting forests and ever destroying them. And there are also many other sustainable practices that are embedded in these stories. I also observed that many stories are full of, they mention many endangered species of plants and of fruit crops that we no longer see here today. And so they are a kind of archive of what was or what we need to take care of in this time. And also, the stories also do tell a lot about medicinal benefits of various plants and species. And so when you listen to these stories, you realize that some of the things that you have, some of the plants you see behind your house are actually medicinal, but you learn that from the stories. So I found that very engaging. And I also found out that the communities do have a lot of information but that is never used. So what is the implication for this kind of information that is never used? Well, a lot of money has been spent by NEMA and other non-government organizations, to do a lot of, they call it, information campaigns, to inform people about with the dangers of destroying the environment and things like that. But I found that actually that's not necessarily because people do know what should be done. They kept on asking and saying, well, we know what we should do, but we know that people come from, they say from Kampala, or they come from the big offices, and destroy what we have preserved for years. And so, therefore, the problem, therefore, is not that people don't have information, or they don't know how to sustainably work and harvest what nature gives them, but the problem is elsewhere. And so I thought that there's need to involve indigenous communities in drawing measures to address environmental issues. A kind of a bottom-up approach needs to be done or encouraged. And I also observed that there's need to encourage the archiving of indigenous environmental knowledge from the different communities around Uganda. Now, this study, is a step towards, demonstrating how humanities can actually work with other fields. I am from the background literature, and the study was anchored in literature and environment, but you see, it involves discussions with ecology, the field of ecology, and with sustainability studies, and with conservation biology, and with environmental studies and environmental justice. And all of that emerged, in my readings and my literature review. And so this project is a big step, towards exploring the interdisciplinary nature of our humanities fields, because sometimes we do a lot of zero grazing and we keep to our own fields. So I saw that there's a lot of potential. We can actually work with people in forestry. We can work with people, in our culture and the like. Now, the project did a lot, enabled a lot of community conversations on biodiversity, preservation, and environmental issues. So it generated a lot of conversations, and that's how I came to learn that people actually know what should be done and laugh at policymakers who think that they don't know when they actually do the wrong things themselves. And so we benefited by holding conversations, because now, after the stories, after the performances, we would start and discuss about what we learned from the stories, and that gave us platform to discuss these environmental issues, at a community level. And so in this study, I was able to, I've taken out 2 research articles, and I have presented at 2 international conferences, and I have also presented at a conference organized by CHUSS and 1 seminar at the University of Stellenbosch. And so I'm very grateful to Andrew Mellon Foundation for the funding. Yes, I found some challenges, because it's mainly because of the pandemic that came around just as I was about to get to the field. So I had to do a lot of cancellations here and there. And of course, even when eventually I was able to go to the field, I couldn't meet some people because they were scared of meeting people from Kampala, because they imagine this is the seat of COVID. But otherwise, I was able to do all that I wanted to do in time, and I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eve, for this wonderful presentation. I like the multidisciplinarity of your study. I hope it will benefit from Dr. Kawalia's corpus. I want to invite Dr. Gerard Walulia to talk to us about his study on Idi Amin and how he has managed to reach where we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan, and I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the CHUSS conversations that I call the CHUSS Academic Fireplace. where we are having a talk about what we do in the college. As Ivan has explained, the title of my project is Idi Amin's Identity Through the Camera Lens, Revisiting the 1970s Unpublished Photographs. Of course, many of you have, all of you have certainly heard about Idi Amin, but about 2 years back, there was an archive of some of his old photographs that had never been developed, that was found by researchers from here, from the University of Michigan and other places at UBC, that was developed, and a new set of photos was made public. So that's what I used to write this project. So in this project, my objective was to rely on the interpretation of the photographs of Idi Amin to determine who Amin was. As we know that so many people had defined Idi Amin on the basis of their personal experiences, but also on the basis of what they had read. So I wanted to use photographs to solicit for opinions from people who are living today, especially those who didn't experience the regime of Idi Amin, to find out who they refer to Idi Amin as. So the project also aimed to investigate how Idi Amin used photographs to manage the collective perceptions and attitudes of people towards him and his regime. So in this part of the project, I'm looking at how Amin used photographs to do some form of propaganda for himself and his regime. The project also intended to shed light on the photographic practices of Amin's regime and how photography as an art was invested in the politics of the nation. Yeah, so these were the main objectives of the project. My mentor was Professor Aaron Mushenjezi, who is now at UCU. So in terms of how the funding furthered my research, as a result of the funding I received from Andrew W. Mellon, I have been able to conduct more research, and as a result, I will soon have a few new publications. Again, as a result of this funding, I have been able to create a wider research network, especially following my recent residence at the University of Michigan in the US. The funding has also initiated me in a community of researchers in the college and the university at large. Many of you people, I would only meet you on campus, but I wouldn't know who is who. But as a result of involvement in this project, I have been able to know many people within the university and to know what they are doing and what they are working on. The current project has also expanded my knowledge in using humanistic approaches to research. People who are from the Department of Journalism and Communication, they told us that Andrew Mellon does not fund journalism studies that we have traditionally done. So we had to think around other ways of working within a humanistic way, and as a result, that's why we are able to do what we have been able to do. So in terms of contribution to humanities and humanistic social sciences, research in the Global South, the project has contributed to knowledge, to what we know in terms of the political history of Uganda. The study has also generated new knowledge, especially in the field of photojournalism, and also demonstrating that interpretation of photographs is heavily dependent on culture and context. In the process of interpreting these photographs, you could see that people interpret photographs on the basis of their experiences, but also on the basis of their affiliations. You would see that people from regions which are more closer, for instance, to West Nile, they were more likely to give you a positive outlook of Amin on the basis of what they see in the photographs. this also related to people who were, for instance, from the Islamic faith. So the interpretation is so much dependent on context and culture. And the study also showed us that there are changes in the interpretation of photographs over time. That's why people who didn't live, for instance, in the times of Amin, could give you sometimes a positive opinion about Amin, yet those who lived then gave you more negative. But also, even those who initially seem to have held negative opinions of Amin, over time, they seem to have changed their opinion and started to see Amin in a more positive outlook. And finally, the challenges I faced during this project, some project activities could not start in time because of COVID-19, for instance, the research residence. And also, there has been some frustrating delays in publishing, especially the first article that I wrote. And then the last obstacle is certainly the heavy workload, because we have had to do this postdoc as we continue to do our regular work as members of staff. So that means that sometimes you are not able to put in as much time as you may want to complete certain aspects in time. But overall, I want to thank the funders, I want to thank the college management and the steering committee of the project for supporting us. These processes have been fairly smooth, from the requesting of money to everything. I think the things have been good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walulia, for using the time as prescribed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Kawalia, for that presentation. So what I want to do is to ask one question, which all of you will answer as we converse about this. So Dr. Deo Kawalia, how can environmental literature benefit from your corpus? And how can photojournalism or photo interpretation benefit from this corpus which you are building, which you have built? I know that you are continuing to do the work. And I want to ask, I'll ask Dr. Navulia to answer almost the same question, because you're talking about multidisciplinarity, the interdisciplinarity. How can your environmental literature, which is your passion, benefit from the corpus? And how can you use photography to enhance your environmental literature? Okay, I think let's start with Dr. Deo Kawalia. Just show us the relevancy of your corpus to Dr. Nabulia's and Dr. Walulia's.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lukanda. Yes, although I define the corpus as being used mainly by linguistic researchers, but of course it can also be used for all other researches in other fields. And of course, for example, environmental literature, since this is a collection of texts as they use, as they appear as language is used naturally. For example, I'm just giving an example. You could study, for example, the attitudes of people or opinions, attitudes of people towards environmental, towards the environmental issues by analyzing the kind of language and how people, the kind of language that you use to talk about the environment, and from that you can, I think, I think if we agree with me that could be something that
Can she use the corpus in building, let's say, a glossary for environmentalists?
Exactly, because as I mentioned, one of the things we do with the corpora is to generate term lists. So you could, because for example, the corpus I built is organized in what we call topics and genres. So, specifically, I think I have a folder or a section about environmental texts. So if you analyzed that only, then you can study everything to do with environment. You could go financial, you could go education, that's what it is. So you can come up with a glossary. You can write a dictionary about the environment, because in dictionary writing we have specialized dictionaries, special field dictionaries. So we can find a dictionary of environment, and to do that, that's where you get the words to do and the meanings by analyzing the context in which those words are used.
Okay, thank you so much, Deo.
About the
oh yes,
about the photos, I don't know, because this is really
yeah.
text, so it doesn't include the photos.
Don't photos constitute text?
Well, in
in
our
some-
understanding, I know for sure that in your understanding, photos can constitute text, but for linguistic, in the linguistic sense,
Okay.
they are not.
You're dealing with words.
Words, yes.
specifically.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. How can environmental research benefit from this kind of corpus?
Thank you very much, Dr. Lukanda. It's very interesting because actually I began by thinking, oh, the Lias can actually write a paper together. You know, Nabulia, Walulia, and Kawalia, we can write one paper. I think it will be interesting. Anyway, yes, I can see that I can work with both these scholars in this way. One of the papers that I wrote it talks about conceptions of the landscape as it emerges from the stories that I've read. And I can see that photojournalism can actually construct images from the verbal descriptions of landscapes, and we can actually begin a conversation there. And yes, just as Dr. Kawalia said, I was thinking about, how we can work with the corpus to construct, concepts that are hard to express. Now, environmental literature faces a challenge because some of the concepts are always expressed in the English language, and things like when you discuss this with communities, you find you have to use many words to express something like pollution and something like climate change. Well, of course, you have sentences to work with, but, well, I think the corpus can actually help us to go around the linguistic bit of these concepts and to bring them home to the communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eve. I want to go to Dr. Walulia. Since there's some good distance between you and Dr. Kawalia, maybe you remove your mask so that we can hear you well. How can photojournalism or photo interpretation benefit from the corpus? And the other question in relation to what Dr. Nabulia was presenting about is how can we use that photography to talk about the environment beyond Idi Amin?
Thank you very much. First of all, the corpus and environmental literature, I can say that they provide a context within which photographs can be interpreted. But also, photographs can be used to tell environmental stories, as Eve has mentioned. But I don't know in the case of the corpus, this looks like a completely different thing. I don't see that there can be any other relationship outside the knowledge that the corpus can provide a context within which someone can interpret photographs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walulia. Dr. Kalyande for ably answering the questions. We are pressed for time. I want to take only 2 questions, and then the conversation will continue on Zoom. Who are the lucky 2? 2 questions, if any. Spire's hand is up, and Dean's hand is up. Dean Sauda Namial.
Thank you very much, Ivan, and thank you very much, presenters. I have 2 questions, one to Deo. You did not tell us what kind of corpus you worked with. Was it a spoken corpus or a written corpus? And then 2, what plans do you have to improve on this corpus? Because a corpus which is not annotated is not that useful, especially to the linguistic community, among those who don't speak the language. So if I don't speak to Nyankole Ruchiga without annotation, then that corpus cannot really, be of much use. Is there a way the funders can help you, give you more money so that you can do the word part of speech annotation and then morpheme to morpheme annotation so that it can be more useful to both the scientific and linguistic community? And the second one is to Gerard. Is there specific devices you use in the interpretation of photographs? In photolinguistics, there are clear devices that even if I don't relate to that photo in terms of, say, cultural, social, political orientation, I can still make a meaningful interpretation of that photo. What happens in journalism beside how people relate to the photographs? Are there specific devices that we can learn from? Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. And the funders have had your appeal that they should be given more money.
Yes, thank you. My question goes to Walulia, just to push for a bit of more reflexivity to help us contextualize your presentation and analysis. What are your own views about Idi Amin?
Okay, thank you so much. So, Deo, please use 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Namiaro, for your questions. The first one, spoken or written, it is both, but in I don't know what sense of spoken you are referring to, but as in oral, yes, it's written text, what I have now, but of course, as part of it as a result of transcription from recorded audios and videos. So in that sense, it is, I think, spoken, yes. So it's both, because I did field work and went to the Runyankore speaking areas and recorded people and came and transcribed it. On the second one, the plan, yes, I agree with you that although some people, I mean, this is a debatable thing, because some people actually say a corpus to leave it really natural. They don't want it to be annotated, but I mean, I just found that recently, that some people who advocate that. But I agree with you that, of course, it is still useful, but it is more useful to those that are not speaking the language, as I mentioned, so when it is annotated and tagged. So yes, you are my dean, so I will come and we see how we get these funds. But of course, we need more funds. Those funds that were provided couldn't do that. And of course, my project was a 1-year project, so it was really, not possible to go that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dean, you asked whether there are any specific devices that we use in the interpretation of photographs in journalism, and the answer is yes. Photographs are taken in the way they are taken for specific reasons. For instance, when you look at a photo, for instance, of this auditorium, and my main focus is, say, the gentleman operating the microphones at the back, and I take him from here, then the intention then is that he would appear small before whoever is going to read that photograph, and therefore the interpretation will come out that that one is insignificant. So the positioning of elements within a photo determines the interpretation they receive. That's why you see during campaigns a photo of an opposition candidate appearing in New Vision may, for instance, show you the crowd when it has kind of shrunk, to give you an impression that this person has no support. So photos are taken in a way they are taken for a purpose, unless you are just an amateur photographer who doesn't know what you are taking. So there are specific devices and rules which guide the interpretation of photographs. Spire my own interpretation of Amin. I don't know, after listening to so many interpretations from different people, my mind seems kind of clogged, but I think my quick opinion is that Amin meant well for Uganda, only that he had no way around of making sure that Uganda is well and his seat is well. So as long as his seat as a president was threatened, he could do anything to safeguard his own position, and that might have guided some of the decisions and actions that he took. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Walulia. Thank you, Dr. Kawalia. And thank you, Dr. Navulia, for ably discussing corpus, environmental literature, and photography. I want to thank our online audience. We haven't forgotten about you. Thank you for being part of the conference, and would like to encourage you to continue posting online so that the conversation can continue. CHUSS is on the move, and this conversation can take us to a better destination. Thank you, the organizers, for giving me the opportunity to chair, and I want to hand over this microphone to Cindy on behalf of the organizing committee. Thank you.
Dr. Ivan Lukanda. Thank you so much, Deo Kawalia, Dr. Eve Navulia, and Dr. Gerard Walulia. And thank you so much, our audience, for listening, for participating. As you can see, we need to continue with these conversations. Special thanks to our online audience. We are now going for a lunch break. We are running short of time, but we'll still catch up with time. Let's go for lunch. We'll have 30 minutes lunch time. We'll use the same method we used during break time. And Duncan, you've been giving coupons out. We have our invited guests for the lunch discussion here. Charity Ahimbisiwe is in the house. Sarah Birete Miz is in the house. Mwalimu Ndebesa is in the house. Professor Julius Kiza is coming to have lunch with us. Honorable Norbert Mao was even here in the morning. He's coming back. So it's going to be interesting after lunch. I hope to see you at 2:20. Thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch.